Greetings all. As you can see, we are now transitioning from risk management to emergency management. So I'm going to give you a little basic introduction here to emergency management, just to give you an idea of how things are set up and the challenges we face as a state. Uh, our state emergency management policy, and this is pretty much uniform across the United States, that all emergencies are initially presumed to be local. They're a local problem. Which means they're managed by local first responders, fire, police, hospitals, etc. Up and until it starts getting out of control to the point where it's gone beyond the ability of the local government, then it becomes a state issue. Take the Gatlinburg fire recently, or the floods in Nashville. Those originally were local issues. They quickly got accelerated, out of hand, so then the state had to be brought in and requested as a result. And that usually occurs when the local government says, okay, we've done what we can. This is beyond our capabilities. We need help from the state. And you'll find that despite 9/11, there's still not a lot of cooperation between the federal and state and local governments. Local governments are great at helping one another, county to county across the state, but sometimes there's a little bit of a breakdown between the county and the state and the feds. Not all the time, but I know some responders think to this day we need to get rid of a lot of bureaucracy. As you're probably aware, you've heard that the president can declare natural disasters and emergency situations, and there's plenty of powers there within the presidency to declare these kind of things. Generally, before the president's going to declare a state of emergency or an emergency situation in a specific state, they're going to talk with the governor first. And normally it's the governor who calls the president and says, okay, we've exhausted our capabilities. We need federal assistance. And so again, rarely have we seen a president, regardless of who's in the White House, ignore requests for federal aid or refuse to pay things. Now and then, FEMA can be a little bureaucratic in terms of some local payments for like generators or ice or water, but generally you don't see the president telling a disaster prone state or a state that's suffering disaster that, too bad you're on your own. But again, a local government can't jump over the state. So let's say, Hamilton County or Shelby County or, the city of Knoxville have a local emergency. They can't sit there and say, whoa, we need help. Let's call the feds. They've got to go through the state. They've got to go through the governor's emergency management folks, who then in turn contact the federal government. So you're going to see conflicts between there. Generally, when should these things be required? It's only been recently where the state legislature said, look, we need to allow local governments to declare their own local states of emergency. Up until a couple of years ago, if there was, say, a crisis in Knoxville, the Knoxville mayor had, his or her hands were tied in terms of a local emergency. They had to contact the state and say, hey, look, can you help us? Or can you get some emergency issues going here for us? Now a local mayor can say, look, I got a disaster that just popped up. I'm declaring a state of emergency. And as a result, we're going to get things going on there. So there's that. And again, how long should they be? What are we going to do? What kind of powers of authority are we going to have there? So again, our general law, rules, and regulation here is going to be pretty broad. So it doesn't have to be a fire or a flood. It can be a pandemic. It can be all kinds of things where they say, look, we have a state of emergency here. We've got to basically start opening up emergency operation centers, opening up shelters, mustering the troops, getting all the equipment together to head off whatever this emergency is. And again, our governor can generally 15 days declare an emergency. It's usually 15 days at a whack, and then it can be renewed. But again, rare is the legislature that's going to start fighting with the governor unless they think it's becoming a political issue. But when you've got widespread flooding or fires, etc., nobody's going to tell the governor, oh, it's not that bad, too bad. It's the governor's call. The governor has a lot of power and authority when it comes to emergencies. And again, once this gets into action, all kinds of things start to occur. We start mobilizing all our different equipment. We start calling in different agencies to start assisting us. We open up the state's emergency operations center and the command post. We start stockpiling and then getting supplies, etc., to the afflicted areas. So things start to move when an emergency is declared. And one of the things our legislature has said, look, when there's an emergency, sometimes we have to kind of relax the rules and regulations when we're talking about the purchasing of goods and services. Remember, government makes nothing, so they have to buy everything. So as a result, they have to go that route, and sometimes you just can't go through the real tedious process of ordering equipment where you have to go through the purchasing department and the procurement department. Sometimes you have to do a direct purchase. So let's say, for instance, you are in a county and you got hit with a tornado. You need generators. Well, you can't start going through the state purchasing program to try to find a generator. You may have to just get somebody to get over to Lowe's, if they're open, or Home Depot and say, here's the county credit card, give me all the generators you got. Now that's dangerous, of course. You can see that being abused, but generally the whole idea is to allow government to continue to function without the red tape. So again, entering into a contract, when we say incur obligations, telling another county, for instance, look, if you let us use all your equipment, we'll pay for your workers' comp and we'll pay for any damage, etc. Hiring people that you normally would have to go through the HR department, utilizing volunteers, renting stuff. So basically, getting all these different things. The governor, of course, empowered to essentially stop the sale of alcohol, explosives, but not weapons. We do not allow the governor here to interfere with the sale and possession of firearms. Make provision for temporary housing. That doesn't mean people can be forced, you have to let people into your home. That means the governor can say, look, we're going to open up these government buildings, we're going to open up some schools, we're going to make emergency housing and shelter. We're going to have to determine what kind of public utilities, whether or not we're going to evacuate a specific area. So a lot of power and authority there to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the state. But again, there are limitations. Oh, I should mention, by the way, that the governor can close places of assembly and places of amusement. So in other words, the governor can say, we have an emergency here, Dollywood, you're closed. And that's that. So we can affect private businesses as well. What the state can't do is get involved in a labor dispute as a excuse to go in there. Cannot interfere with the dissemination of news. Can't sit there and start shutting down the internet or preventing newspapers from reporting, etc., or news reporters. In terms of the armed forces, you don't start sending troops in and saying, we're going to stay in your home, or we're going to have greater power and authority. But, the governor can proclaim martial law, can create curfews, can tell people, you're going to get off the street because right now it's dangerous, so by 9 o'clock, everybody has to be home. If not, you're going to be arrested. So that can occur. But again, that's generally a 15-day scenario at a whack. The governor or a mayor can't say, curfew for the next 90 days. No, it's 15 days that has to be reviewed to see if it's still necessary. And during that 15 days, if 3 days later they'll say, look, we have no problem, we have no civil unrest, curfew's lifted, they can do that as well. But again, when you talk about martial law, closing places of amusement and assembly, alcohol, getting people off the streets, and again, when we're talking about firearms, we don't interfere with the lawful possession of firearms. We don't want militias walking around, as armed posses, but nevertheless, the government can't say, sorry, we have an emergency, give me your handgun. Not here. So again, I think I'm repeating myself there, but the key is evacuation. We do have mandatory evacuation here. That means technically, law enforcement can come to your home and say, I'm sorry, you're leaving. And if you say, too bad, I'm going to stay here and die, they'll say, no, you're not, you're coming with us. They can forcibly remove you. Do they want to do that? No. Do they usually do that? No. Normally they say, okay, well, that's your decision. And people certainly will not leave or they'll hide, etc. But technically, the government can remove you from your home. So I know it's really quick, down and dirty. You can slow it down, but just kind of an introduction to the world of emergency management, which you can see differs quite a bit from risk management. Have a great day.